This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Friday, June 2nd, 2023. Welcome to thetruthcentral.com. And we're broadcasting every weekday, a podcast of about a half an hour. And I want to cover a lot of news today, so let's just jump right into it. The Senate overturned Biden's student loan cancellation program. Basically, Biden is doing everything he can to try to win the vote of the students who have tuition loans that have to be repaid. So the Senate voted to overturn his student debt transfer program, which he wanted to bypass Congress and basically cancel the debt of a certain group of loan recipients. The problem is that there are already a lot of loan cancellation programs available. If you become a teacher or a healthcare worker or a public servant or whatever, you can get your student loan canceled. And what the government is really not wanting to do, at least in the student program, the Senate is saying we want the student loans repaid. I think there's a real pushback against the student tuition loans in the country because the universities have just expanded hugely. And Obama canceled the private student loan program, which is being run largely through the banks. He made it entirely a government program. And when Obama did that, the government just threw money in it and made it available to people. Of course, they want it paid back. And as typical on the left, once it's paid out, it continues. It doesn't stop. The program goes on and on, only expands. And then eventually those who have to pay the debt back come and say, we can't pay it back. We want it canceled. So the taxpayer foots the bill of expanding the universities into a neo-Marxist woke left. And I think the country's getting sick and tired of it. Certainly I am. I've had enough of this. The universities today are Marxist institutions, and if they want to teach destruction of the United States of America, as far as I can see, there's no purpose in having universities. The universities are not producing students who are knowledgeable on anything except gender identity. If that's the case, we don't need it. All right, now the left is also, this is another story I thought was extremely interesting because this was in the Federalist. Larry Behrens wrote this story, and he essentially said, when you take time to look at the phase about Joe Biden's hard hat environmentalism, which is in a recent AP Associated Press story, and it sure sounds good. I mean, a hard hat environmentalism, that makes sense. That's okay. And they're saying that AP is saying that this is coming out of the Biden campaign. Well, what Federalists found, what Behrens found, is the AP stories that are mentioning phrases like climate change, global warming, climate disasters, which they've done hundreds of times, have been receiving $8 million in grants in early 2020 to the purpose of the money is to fund the Climate Journalism Initiative, employing 20 new reporters to transform how the AP covers the story. Now, isn't that just wonderful? There's actually an AP article that is linked to this, which, again, this was an article on February 12th, 2022. The Associated Press announced today that it will significantly expand its climate coverage, creating a standalone desk that will enhance the global understanding of climate change and its impact across the world. Well, isn't that just wonderful? And so the new climate desk will leverage the expertise of the AP's global staff to infuse climate coverage in all aspects of the news. Well, isn't that just special? Now, where do they get the money to do this? The expansion is received by several philanthropic organizations, including the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, Quadrivium, the Rockefeller Foundation. Okay, well, the Hewlett was at Hewlett Packard, and Quadrivium. Well, let's take a look at what Quadrivium is. It invests in evidence-based solutions to some of society's most urgent challenges. Okay, who are these people? You don't find that on their website. Ocean health, climate change, science understanding. Okay, so it's a leftist group. And James Murdoch, who is the founder of it, wasn't that just special? And Catherine Murdoch. You don't think this has any relationship to the Murdoch family? Well, most likely it does. Okay, so that's how we get the AP coverage of the climate. And when you hear all the news stories promoting climate change, your antenna ought to go up. Is this being financed by some grant? Pfizer was pretty good at that during the pandemic. The pay for the news. I mean, the CIA does it. The CIA had a Mockingbird program going back into the 50s. They paid prominent journalists to publish their propaganda. Chris, what do you think?
The fifth column is alive and well.
Yeah, it sure is.
Hey,
I'll tell
look
you.
at this, though. If you see the intertwining between the Democrat Party and the major news media of America, where you have some people married to others, news leaders or point people. I believe George Stephanopoulos is a high-ranking member of the. I don't remember what his rank is, but I think he's either if he's not the news director, he's in charge of content in one way or another. And he was a former mouthpiece for a leftist president.
Clinton. He was very, very prominent with Clinton.
But all these reporters are married to Democrats somewhere along the line in politics, or vice versa. Or there's some kind of relation here and there. The bias is obvious. We see it every day. They are the fifth column, but still, people just are trained to trust journalists and not read between the lines sometimes, or not understand where the news is coming from.
And they get away with an ideological agenda presented as science.
And some get paid.
They get paid handsomely to do it. If you want to destroy America, there's a lot of money. You want to preserve money, you got the Department of Justice on your case. This is not America. This is the Soviet states of America. We're becoming the USSA. Let's go to the next story here. This is a typical California story anymore. California has spent $17 billion on homelessness, and it's not working. Now, this is a Wall Street Journal story. It's done by a couple of authors, Christine Duke and Jim Carlton. They sent photographers out. I mean, they're basically covering a pretty good story here and spending a lot of money doing it. So they're showing that essentially this Wood Street encampment, which is a major one in Oakland, California, they're saying firefighters arrived mid-morning at a homeless camp on Wood Street to put out a fire spreading across a tinderbox landscape of discarded furniture, debris, abandoned cars, dwellings from tents, tarps, and plywood. The fire crews struggled for about 2 hours. There weren't enough hydrants because no one was ever supposed to live on this stretch of dirt that sneaked beneath Interstate 880, the freeway, which connects Oakland to San Jose. But over the past 6 years, the property became home to more than 300 homeless families, including drug addicts, mentally ill, those unable to get a grip on Bay Area housing with a warehouse job or a construction gig. I mean, basically, you've got a large group of people in the United States right now today that aren't making it. And the number of homeless in California grew about 50% between 2014 and 2022. The state, California's got about 12% of the U.S. population. It's got about half the nation's homeless, about 115,000 people, which is probably a low estimate. That's what the federal and state government says. I'm coming to if the federal government says it, I'm beginning to think they're just lying. At any rate, the rent in California is very high. These people aren't there because they have any aspiration of getting housing in California. They're there because the weather's good. And California spent $17 billion combating homelessness in the past 4 fiscal years, and the government, Newsom wants to spend another $3.7 billion. Well, again, these are the kinds of stories which are indicating that America is really not succeeding. There's a couple stories out that I was not able, I just didn't post. It was just too much today. But there are a number of stories which are pretty disturbing. I'll cover one quickly, saying essentially that the jobs being created in the United States are being taken by foreigners. So we've got all this, creating all these jobs. We got all these statistics about how good the economy is doing, how well Biden is doing, creating jobs, and in fact, the Federal Reserve might not need to expand its interest program. Keep increasing interest rates because there's jobs everywhere, right? Okay, well, what they're finding is essentially when you really look into it, there's two factors. Number one is that uh, people are having to take 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. So a lot of the new jobs being created are being created for people to have second, third jobs. Secondly, you go into a large number of people who are taking second, third jobs, also foreigners taking jobs. A large percentage of jobs being taken are being taken today by foreigners. So when you put these two together, here's the article I was looking for. It said essentially we live in a strange time because the estimates we get about all the jobs, which look so bright, what they are not telling us is that foreigners are the ones who are getting the jobs. And there's virtually no new jobs really were created for much of 2022. When you take a look at the people taking second and third jobs, the number of foreigners taking the jobs, the number of low-income people who are coming into the United States and willing to take these jobs. And I think essentially, except for the federal spending, which now we have the debt ceiling raised again, except for the bubble that we've got in federal spending, there's nothing going on in the economy. If we don't keep spending trillions of dollars and pumping it into the economy, we don't have an economy right now. And we're just going to produce another bubble, which we have produced with all this federal debt, $33 trillion and counting. And we're not generating the kind of substantial real economic activity that you would expect from a robust economy. The next story here, the grid, our electric grid, would need a approximately $20 trillion upgrade if we're going to transition to wind and solar. This is a story that's being put on the oilprice.com. And in 2023, the cost to upgrade the grill is now estimated at 21 trillion. Back in 2022, Bloomberg estimated the grid overhaul would be 14 trillion over 30 years between 2020 and 2050. Now it's at 21 trillion. People just don't understand a couple things about electric, wind and solar going into electricity. Number one, it's got to get into the grid. Well, the grid is not designed to utilize wind and solar, which are intermittent, which have difficulty being stored. They have to be stored in batteries. And again, they're costly, but the grid itself was not designed to handle wind and solar. So it's the transition, which people think, oh, we're just going to go to green and solar. Well, it's not that simple. So just to read a little bit about this, there's massive investments in the grid adaptation that have to be done. There's local opposition to these projects so that people don't like transmission lines running over their backyards. They don't like forests being cleared for new lines to go in. And if we're going to have electric cars and all of this, we're going to need enormous numbers of charging stations everywhere. And by the way, there's also a story today that, again, one of the ones I didn't post because there was just so much I was reading today that caught my attention. But the Jaguars just had a major recall of Jaguar electric cars because they tend to catch fire. Isn't that lovely? So you spend all this money for a Jaguar electric vehicle, and then you find out you get a recall notice because the thing is going to be burning up unpredictably. The risk of fire, it's a remarkable story. The Jaguar Land Rover is recalling 6,400 I-Pace electric SUVs delivered to the U.S. because the high voltage electric battery may overheat and catch fire. And what Jaguar is saying is the problem is centered around the EV batteries produced by LG Energy Solutions. And the batteries have forced 5 other automakers to issue similar fire warnings. What Jaguar is saying is don't park your Jaguar close to your home because it could catch fire. Wasn't that wonderful? These technologies are, I think it comes down to the reality, and I'd like people to face it, that the green lobby knows these things don't work. First of all, they know that science is junk. They know that, in fact, carbon dioxide is not the turning knob of the Earth's temperature. Carbon dioxide is a minor molecule. I saw someone in the comments were saying, how do we know water vapor is 70% of all greenhouse gases? What about the desert? The desert doesn't have any water. Well, it doesn't mean the desert doesn't have water vapor in the atmosphere. It's a different issue. There's water throughout the planet, and there's water that absorbs into the soil, but there's also water that escapes up into the atmosphere. And this is not clouds. Clouds form from condensation, which is a distinct phenomenon. This is just simply water vapors, molecules of water in the air, which are gaseous. They're not liquefied, but they're there. And that's what the atmosphere utilizes to essentially be a greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases at night when the sun doesn't shine, so I explained to the left, when the sun doesn't shine, go outside, it's dark. When it's dark, it means the irradiance that the sun has put into the earth during the day will escape back from the earth into outer space if there's nothing to stop it. Greenhouse gases capture some of that irradiance and keep the earth so it doesn't freeze every night. If we didn't have greenhouse gases, would not be habitable. And carbon dioxide we exhale, and part of this whole green agenda is to demonize human beings because we're our own. This is the Anthropocene, which they are saying means that we are going to cause our own destruction. But when I encounter stories like this, when people don't realize that you've got these huge solar plants, take a huge amount of land to put solar panels on it, or you're the same with wind turbines. First of all, you've created a lot of junk because this stuff is not going to last very long. It's going to burn out. And then what do you do with it? So we have to recycle all this junk. You got, $20,000 solar panel on your roof that the government paid for. Well, the government's not going to pay to remove it when it doesn't work. It's not going to necessarily pay to get you a new one. And, you've added a lot of weight to your roof. Well, the roof probably wasn't designed for that weight. And again, the grid in the United States today is based on being driven by hydrocarbon fuels. And it's being driven by the fact that we have automobiles. Much of our transportation, virtually all of it until recently, has been hydrocarbon fuel based. So we don't need an electric grid in order to run our cars. Once you add that element into it, the need for a greater production of electricity is dramatically increased. And you can't just wave a magic wand and have that infrastructure come into place. It'll take tens of years if we really are serious about this, and it still won't work. That's what the left knows. The left is not trying to save the planet. There's become a neo-Marxist agenda, and it's all about destroying capitalism, about reducing our standard of living. You'll read my book on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. I spend the first 3 chapters showing you that this climate change movement did not come out of environmentalism. It came out basically of Malthusianism. There's too many people on the planet. That book is still doing extremely well. And I'm very pleased to have it be doing so well. But the point is that the green agenda is a ideological hoax that is not science-based. And the left and the scientists on the left know it. But remember our first stories we covered today. There's a lot of money supporting this agenda. And there are a lot of people making money on it. So when Obama or now Biden puts billions of dollars into solar and wind, his cronies and buddies are going to say, I'll take the money. I'll build you a wind farm, and I don't care if it doesn't work because I'll make millions doing it. And then the junk is your problem. I know it wouldn't work to start, but I built, there's your solar panels. Have at it. And, we've got dozens of these cylinders around. And China came in and said, we'll manufacture the solar panels cheap. And China has the hold on the electric batteries that go into the cars. It has the hold on the solar panels. All we've done is send money to China on this boondoggle deal. It's absolutely insane. Chris, want to comment? I'm going to reach for a book or two here.
Let's add more to this. There's a lot of NIMBYism going around when it comes to the climate change movement as well. You hear the shouts, we need more wind farms, but not here. Yeah, not here. We don't want them here.
Yeah.
You
Right.
peasants can deal with the
We'll put
consequences.
them in the background of conservatives. How we'll go use their land. How about that?
Not only,
We'll get the Department of Justice to do eminent domain on
Right.
Republican cities.
or just
there aren't any
there aren't that many of those.
Republican cities, are there?
Stick them in the Atlantic, destroy the environment there. If you drive past some of these defunct wind farms, even some of the kind of working wind farms, if you will, they're complete eyesores, and that's why these guys are NIMBYs when it comes to such things. You saw a while back during one of your programs, I posted a couple of pictures of dying solar farms as well.
Yeah. And they're all over the place. Of course, the media is not going to cover it because the media these days, they're not making it on the subscriptions. The New York Times is not making it on the paper sold in the streets anymore. None of them are. And they're all taking money from special interests that want to create a desk for them to cover climate change. And that desk is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation or some other leftist group that has an ideological agenda that they expect to be pushed. So we are in an age of disinformation, and my books are all saying, subtitled The Age of Disinformation. Now, as we look at the stories I posted today, I'm basically saying here we're into a fundamental economic decline. And I don't think it's reversible because what we're dealing with, and I'm going to encourage people. I'll start next week with a major push to get this book out there. We've done this book. I've done it with Dean Heskin with Swiss America. And basically we're saying that we're going into a global crash and it's going to create an historic gold rush. Now, if I know reading about economics is not often your most favorite thing to do, but if you want to basically educate yourself on what's going to be happening and figure out what you can do to position yourself to have it be less damaging to you, I solidly recommend you read this book because I go through and Dean and I go through the 1973 economic crisis that began with the OPEC embargo, Jimmy Carter, and it ended up being double-digit inflation with a stagnant economy. It was our first time of stagnant inflation. We had to have Paul Volcker come in, and for the next few years, Paul Volcker raised interest rates to 22% to get a hold of the inflation in the 1970s. We've been through that once. Today, we've got, again, this energy nonsense going on, and we're having prices of energy rise when abundant hydrocarbon fuels could make it, or nuclear energy expanded, could dramatically reduce the cost of energy. Instead, we're committing economic suicide, and we've got a stagnant economy. Without all this government money coming in, we wouldn't have a robust economy at all. It's a bubble economy. Now, I point out in 2008, when the subprime mortgage failed, that we went through the bank failure. And again, people have a very short memory. And this book points out it's going to happen again because we've got the commercial credit market, which is now 30%, 40% office are vacant. Why are people building office buildings? Who's going to go in them? People are not going to work anymore. They're working from home. And I cover the BRICS threat, the fact that there's de-dollarization. You've got this Russia, China, anti-American group of nations forming, and pretty soon they will solidify around a BRICS, possibly gold-based currency. So if you'll take a look again at the Dean Heskin, who is the CEO of Swiss America, and the offer that they are generously providing, if you'll just fill out this form on our sponsors for the Walking Liberty $50, where you can get 250 of these. They are 90% silver, and then an introductory first time, once only offer, starting to talk to Swiss America, you can buy up to 250 of these coins. That's worth it alone. You should think seriously about your IRAs, your 401ks going into gold, but you better do it with somebody like Swiss America who will follow the rules and tell you how to do it the right way. Also talk to Matt McMillan for annuities and for universal life. I think I'm going to start doing special broadcasts outside of the news just to cover these areas because they're so important. I'm going to start focusing on why you need annuities, and we'll run programs on that. I think I'm going to focus on the issues of gold and why you need to get some gold. These are things that the economics are extremely important, and the economics are going to drive our news for the next few years. You might as well get used to it and begin to really understand how the economics work. Because right now we've got a socialist economy, and socialist economies create bubbles and they fail. And the purpose behind this woke movement is to have capitalism collapse. Now, two other stories here pretty quickly. India is importing now a record high amount of Russian oil. So Russian crude oil to India surged in May. The company taking in 1.96 million barrels per day. They've imported, India is importing more oil from Russia than it did from Iraq, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the US combined. Now, what's happening is that the world is shifting away from US and even Middle Eastern oil production. I think OPEC is going to join with the BRICS nations in order to solidify their position as oil producers. And Iran is going to start producing oil because the Biden administration is giving a green light to Iran. I'm covering that next. But the idea of the sanctions to have Russia denied the amount of money it needs in order to fight the war in Ukraine won't work if Russia finds an active market with India and China for its energy, for its oil and natural gas. The United States and Western Europe are the only two blocks of countries that are intentionally deconstructing, destroying our economies by this stupid green agenda. The rest of the world knows that oil, and I'm sure most of the people in the oil industry, they may give lip service to fossil fuel. They probably don't really care where the oil came from, but they know it's abundant. And it is not fossil fuel. It's made naturally by the earth on an ongoing basis. And my book shows you the chemical formulas by which oil is formulated. Abiotic oil, not coming from biology, abiotic. Okay, so essentially, we've got to understand the United States is going into a weakening position. By the way, another story I didn't have time to post, there's just so much today. This Ukrainian offensive is going to start. You know what they're doing? First of all, they're having to dig out the minefields that Ukraine itself positioned anti-Russia in order to attack the Russian positions. And Russia's had time to fortify its positions. This offensive is just another way for Zelensky to make more money to steal. The corruption is rampant. On the corruption in government statistics, I think if we had an honest evaluation, you'd find would shift over to voting. There's some interesting things being posted on the internet about this. I think we need I think we need to go back to paper ballots, quite frankly, and get rid of the machines. We need to go back to accountability. We need to go back to these newspapers and journalists who are paid to write stories by ideological groups and foundations. This has gotten to be sycophant. They're sycophants. They're basically pandering, prostituting journalism to whoever will pay for it to tell their ideological point of view. I mean, it's a really pathetic period of time that the left has engineered us into, and the Department of Justice is going to consider anybody to be a potential subversive if you tell the truth. I mean, it is an insane period of time. And the last story I want to cover here is this Biden administration is now again offering Iran a deal like Obama did. Well, that's predictable. If anybody who thinks that Joe Biden is running the country is as demented as Joe Biden is, that person thinking the same has got to be equally demented. Obama's running the country. And we've got another Obama deal going down. We're sending diplomats over to Iran saying that we will release $10 billion in their frozen assets and clemency for their nuclear program. They're not going to punish them anymore for wanting to build it if they'll just take longer to do it. Well, Iran's already caught with enriched uranium to 84% purity. It only needs about 92 or 3% to get to be weapons grade. And Iran is building tunnels under Natanz, which is its major nuclear site, one of its major nuclear sites, to, again, hide what it's doing for developing nuclear weapons. Now, the Biden administration is going to appease Iran. Iran is being offered now to enter BRICS, and Iran will take this money and it will produce more weaponry for Russia to use in Ukraine, and it will also expand terrorism, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in the Gaza Strip, to send rocket attacks into Israel. Lebanon from the north and the Gaza Strip right there in Israel from the Mediterranean. So you've basically got a complete world headed toward nuclear war as we ramp up the pressure with trying to get Finland and Sweden into NATO and Ukraine into NATO on Russia's doorstep, denying Russia access to the Atlantic from either the Baltic Sea they can't get into, bypassing Finland and Sweden, or they can't get into the Mediterranean if Ukraine's in NATO. I mean, and China on the verge of going after Taiwan. As we wrap up here, this has been a week again where I want to warn people that, as I say, in the end, God always wins, but I fear we're coming to the end. It certainly seems like end days when you look at what's going on worldwide. And in the next few months, if you aren't paying attention, you're going to find that you own a home that is, the value of it will be in inflated dollars. Try to sell a home today. First, you're going to have to lower the price because mortgages are now virtually at 7%, 6.9%, 30-year fixed mortgage. And when you do get paid on it, the dollars you receive have a lot less value in them than the dollars you use to purchase that home. So again, we're in a declining market. And as it declines, it's going to collapse. I recommend to people you think seriously about not holding stocks and bonds right now, because when the banks begin to fail, when the bubble bursts, which it certainly will, the stock market's going to take a major hit. Chris, any comments?
It's like they purposely destroy the economy through policy, so the boot can be placed on the neck a bit harder. That's how it works.
Totalitarianism. They want control.
That's how it's worked in socialist and leftist governments for the last, I'd say, 110 years. Unfortunately, for these people who want to engineer something like this, they've all failed.
Yeah, and they don't care about people. They think there's too many people. They want an oligarch and the World Economic Forum and their machines. Those are the ultimate world they want. get rid of all these useless people.
Right,
Well,
and render us dependent on other leftist governments. If you see or oppressive governments, enemy governments, if you will. The West is destroying itself from within economically, and look what it's done to itself.
well, how look? Okay, so we go to digital currency. We have electric cars. We don't have we end hydrocarbon fuels. They don't accept the currency, and you better get some gold,
Right.
because it's been for 2,000 years intrinsic value, and holding some gold and silver might be a good idea right now.
And snap up that social credit score
And
as
by the
well.
way, the moment they turn off the electricity, which they have, what are you going to do? You have no money. You can't communicate with anybody. Your cell phone won't work. You can't be on the internet. What are you going to do? You know, you can't plug your electric vehicle in. You can't go anywhere. Okay, so you immediately have a lockdown by convincing everybody that they'll save the planet by going to electricity, and then you turn the electricity off. I want to also talk. I've been reading. I read all the time. A voracious. This book, The Return of Jonathan, try to contact God and get him on the show. The book is about a society secular. God's out of the ancient gods come back in from Satan. Baal was the golden calf for Moses. When Moses went up to Mount Sinai, the Israelites created a golden calf and began worshiping Baal. Well, Baal was a Mesopotamian god. He was a god of power. Then came Ishtar, who was this mixed gender god. And you began having, if you think that this gender identity is a unique phenomenon, it's an ancient phenomenon. And Moloch, you begin to sacrificing children and babies. You kill babies to satisfy Moloch. These are all ancient. This was done in the ancient world. Mesopotamia. It was Babylon. This is not new. And what Jonathan Cahn is saying is that a world that allows these ancient gods to come back in and rule, which we are doing, is doomed for destruction. Now, I used to ask myself, and he does a pretty good job of understanding that a turning point in the ancient world was when Constantine, Roman Empire, decided that he would go take this pagan empire and go to Christianity, religion of peace. Well, I'm convinced that the reason Constantine made the conversion and why it was accepted in ancient Rome is that ancient Roman mothers were tired of having their perverts. Sick of it. Well, it's Jerome Corsi. Today is Friday. It's June 2nd, 2023. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties today, so I'm wrapping up the show here outside. It's a beautiful day. Looks like it's going to be a nice day to do some reading outside. I hope in the end, God always wins. God will win here. We covered some dark subjects. But, in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, I really encourage everyone to pray and ask God's repentance for allowing it to have gotten to this point. We should never have allowed the Supreme Court to take God out of the schools starting in the 1940s. We've got to get back to God, and we've got to get back to fundamental values that have made America great. We've had an interesting week here. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. God bless you. Thank you very much for joining TheTruthCentral.com.